Right now, somewhere in your house, there is a jar of honey. You probably think of it as breakfast. Your ancestors thought of it as medicine, and they were right, long before anyone knew why. The story of how humans survived sickness before hospitals, before antibiotics, before anyone understood what a bacteria even was, is one of the strangest survival stories on Earth. Getting sick 30,000 years ago did not mean a few uncomfortable days in bed. It meant a coin flip with death. And the things ancient humans did to tip that coin will change how you think about every bandage in your medicine cabinet. Let's start with a wound. In 1862, an Egyptian papyrus dating back to around 1600 BCE was discovered in Luxor. It is now called the Edwin Smith Papyrus, and it is the oldest surgical document ever found. Inside it are 48 separate case studies of injuries, written with something startling: observations, diagnoses, and treatments. One entry describes closing a wound with stitches. Another describes splinting a broken bone. This was not superstition. This was clinical thinking 3,500 years before the word clinical even existed. But the real surprise is what they used to actually stop infection: honey. Egyptian medical texts mention honey as a wound dressing more than 700 times. For decades, this was treated as a charming ancient ritual, nothing more. Then, in the 1990s, microbiologists actually tested it. Honey, it turns out, is naturally antibacterial. It pulls moisture out of bacteria until they die, and it produces hydrogen peroxide as it slowly breaks down. Modern hospitals now stock medical-grade honey dressings for wounds that resist antibiotics. Your ancestors found this answer with no microscope, no lab, and no idea bacteria existed at all. And honey was not the only accident that worked. Across ancient Serbia, Egypt, and China, healers independently discovered the same strange trick: pack a wound with moldy bread. For most of history, nobody understood why this helped. Then in 1928, a scientist named Alexander Fleming noticed mold-killing bacteria in a petri dish and called it penicillin. The first antibiotic in human history had already been in use for thousands of years. We just didn't know its name yet. And wounds came with an even stranger remedy: maggots. Ancient Mayan healers and Aboriginal communities in Australia both independently discovered that letting maggots into an infected wound actually helped it heal. It sounds horrifying, but maggots only eat dead tissue, leaving healthy flesh untouched, and they release compounds that fight bacteria as they feed. This wasn't forgotten folklore. Maggot debridement therapy is still used in hospitals today for wounds that won't respond to anything else. And pain had its own ancient answer. Sumerian tablets from around 3,400 BCE describe a plant they called hul-gil, the joy plant. We know it today as the opium poppy. They had discovered, thousands of years before chemistry existed, a way to dull pain itself. But infection was only half the battle. The other half was figuring out what to do with a body that was already broken. In 1991, hikers found a frozen mummy in the Alps, now known as Otzi the Iceman, dead for over 5,000 years. Tied to his belongings was a small leather pouch. Inside it, 2 pieces of a fungus called birch polypore. For years, nobody understood why he carried them. Then researchers tested the fungus and found it has antiparasitic and antibacterial properties. Otzi also had whipworm eggs in his intestines. He was not carrying a snack. He was carrying his pharmacy. And it wasn't only fungus people relied on. Ancient Sumerian and Egyptian medical texts both describe garlic as a treatment for infection, and they used it constantly, on wounds, in food, even as a preventative. Modern chemistry has since identified the compound responsible: allicin, a substance released when garlic is crushed, that actively kills a range of bacteria. Once again, ancient humans landed on a real biochemical defense with nothing but repetition and trial and error. Broken bones came with their own brutal logic. Bioarchaeologists studying prehistoric skeletons have found fractures that healed in near-perfect alignment, a result that almost never happens by accident. The bones had been set and stabilized, likely splinted with wood, bark, or animal hide, then left to heal exactly where they belonged. Someone in that community knew how to do this, and knew it had to be done quickly. Sickness was not only treated with plants and splints. Sometimes it was treated with distance. Anthropologists studying isolated tribal communities around the world have documented something remarkable. When illness spreads, the instinct to separate the sick from the healthy appears again and again in cultures with no contact with each other. Long before the word quarantine existed, before anyone could explain contagion, communities were building separate shelters for the sick. They could not explain why it worked. They only knew that the camps that did it lost fewer people. And fever told its own story. For most of modern medical history, doctors tried to fight fever aggressively, cooling the body down as fast as possible. It turns out that instinct was backwards. Fever is not a malfunction. It is the immune system deliberately raising the body's temperature to kill pathogens that cannot survive the heat. Ethnographic studies of hunter-gatherer groups show the opposite instinct to modern medicine. The sick were moved closer to the fire and kept warm, not cooled. Their bodies were allowed to burn. It took science until the last century to explain why that old instinct had been right all along. Then there was the most disturbing treatment of all. In multiple sites across Europe, Asia, and South America, archaeologists have found skulls with neat, deliberate holes cut into them, some healed over, meaning the person survived the operation. This is called trepanation, and it is the oldest known form of surgery. Researchers believe it was used to treat seizures, head trauma, and severe pain, an attempt to physically release whatever was causing the problem inside the skull. Studies of healed trepanation sites suggest survival rates were far higher than you would expect from a stone tool and no anesthesia. This was not random violence. It was a procedure, refined and repeated across generations. None of this knowledge lived in books. It lived in people. In 1934, archaeologists in Bad Dürrenberg, Germany, uncovered a Mesolithic grave nearly 9,000 years old, belonging to a woman buried with an extraordinary collection of animal bones, antlers, and tools, unlike anything found around her. Researchers concluded she had almost certainly been a shaman, the healer and spiritual authority of her community. Every hunter-gatherer society ever studied by anthropologists has a figure like her, someone who holds the accumulated medical knowledge of the entire group. Lose that one person, and a tribe could lose centuries of trial and error in a single afternoon. Medicine, in its original form, was not science. It was memory, carried from person to person, refined by failure, and passed down because someone, somewhere, survived long enough to tell the story. And here is what makes all of this quietly devastating. Researchers estimate that roughly a quarter of children in ancient hunter-gatherer societies died before the age of 5, mostly from infection and disease. And yet, the species survived. It survived because of the honey and the moldy bread, because of the maggots nobody wanted to talk about, and the poppy that dulled the pain, because of the garlic and the splints, and the fire kept burning for someone with a fever, because of the shaman who remembered what worked, and the community that separated the sick to protect everyone else. None of it came from a laboratory. All of it came from people, watching, failing, surviving, and trying again. The next time you put a bandage on a cut or take a spoonful of honey for a sore throat, you are repeating a decision your ancestors made tens of thousands of years before they understood why it worked. We like to think medicine started in a laboratory. It didn't. It started around a fire, with someone pressing honey into a wound, hoping, for reasons they could not explain, that it would be enough. And somehow, against every odds stacked in front of them, it was enough, again and again, for thousands of generations, passed hand to hand, story to story, until the same impulse that pressed honey into a wound became the science we trust with our lives today. And it all started with people who had no idea why it worked, only that it did.